see if that works. So welcome everybody. It's Sarah Seidelman, and these are the Hummingbird series interviews while I interview people who I think you'll want to know. And today I have Jen Bauer with me today.
Hello, everyone.
And Jen is just, a fellow colleague, and we got to know each other through Martha Beck coaching. We both trained with, in Martha Beck's coach training. And she is just somebody who is a fan of the Beasties, as I am. And that's kind of how we got to know each other. And she published this beautiful, amazing book with her incredible photography of animals. And it's a book to help you reflect on your Beasties. But we're not really here to talk about that today. I want you guys to know Jen, and she's going to be talking too about this new amazing nature-based coaching institute that she is creating that I'm going to be part of the instructor team for, which I'm pumped about. So,
Absolutely.
Jen, how did you get into the Beasties? How did you get into this how did you get this idea? Like, where did you start? I mean, nobody comes out of the womb as a nature-based coaching person, right?
Not at all. Not at all. But I think we all innately have a connection to nature. And I think that when we have that ability to spend some time with plants or animals and really become present with them, that they have this natural tendency to make us calmer, help us connect with ourselves and bring out that inner wisdom. Even before we ever had tools for it, I felt that when I was out in nature, for example, my husband and I love photography, hence the book. And so we were out in Yosemite and we wanted to do these starscapes, which in order to capture the best lighting for that is going out at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so, we've got our little headlamps and we're walking through the forest and we find this clearing and we set up our cameras. And I just looked up at the sky and noticed like, there are so many stars, and that the only reason why they're all so visible is because it's so dark. And so in that insight became this, in the darkest moments of my life, I have seen stars. That's when they became visible. That's when those moments rose to the surface, was in those dark moments. And so as I captured pictures and I would post-process them, these little pieces of wisdom started to rise to the surface. And that's what I ended up putting in my book. And so I've always felt this tug and this connection to nature. And I've always tried to weave that into my coaching in just an inspired way. And so as far as how the Institute for Nature-Centered Coaching came about, are you familiar with pointillism, that art style?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not an expert on it, but I know it's just like,
yes, it's millions of little dots that create this picture. And I feel like my journey has been individual dots that have been kind of placed throughout this canvas, that the more I connected into my intuition, the more that I did my own self-work, the more I removed the layers of conditioning, the more dots would appear. And the more I connected with other community members, these little dots would just start to form this picture until finally I was like, oh, wow, I'm meant to create this institute. And that felt really big, really big.
Yeah, big project.
Yeah. And so I said, okay, well, if I were to create my own perfect training course, like if I were to create it for myself and everything that I love and everything that I'm fascinated by, what would that look like? And so I just wrote everything out and then realized that I don't know half that stuff. And then I was like, okay, well, how am I going to do it? I can't train in all of it. And then I realized I can hire my friends. I can hire my peers that I adore and admire and go to for these modalities. And that's when it started to kind of all fit into place. And I just realized that I had this beautiful community that was already there, that are these wise people who are teachers in and of themselves that can come on board and co-create this with me.
So cool. Yeah. And when we get assigned a big project like that, the first thing we have to learn is like, we're never going to do this alone. We don't do anything worth doing alone. It's just not, because nature doesn't either. It's all this massive collaboration that's going on.
Yes, everything has its own perfect place.
It does. So before we get more into this institute business, I mean, how did you become a life coach? Like, where did you have your transformation moment? I mean, for most people, for me, I suddenly over a year's time, like became really disenchanted with my work as a physician. What's your story? Like, how did you end up in life coach training? It's not usually because we have a perfect life, by the way. When you end up in life coach training, it's because like everything's falling apart somehow, you know?
Yes. Yes. So I was laid off 5 times and resigned for integrity reasons in 8 years. So that's 7 job changes in 8 years. And so the last 2 of which I had one job for 6 months and then was laid off. And then the next job was for 10 months and was laid off. And so finally I just looked at this guy and was like, all right, so apparently I'm not getting the hint. Apparently I need to be doing something different. So please, please, please just point me in the right direction. And within minutes, and this is what always gives me goosebumps, within minutes, I got a ping in my inbox for Martha's life coach training. And I'd followed her for years and I'd done some of her retreats and workshops and I'd seen her speak. And so I looked at it and thought, well, this will make me more marketable. This would look really good on a resume to just have this line item while I continue to look for another job. And so I was like, well, it's kind of a big investment. So let me get my husband's pulse on it. So we do this walk along the beach in the evenings when he gets home from work in the summertime. And so we're walking along the beach and I'm explaining this and I'm thinking, it'll make me more marketable and I can take the classes in the evenings. So, if I find a job quickly, then, yada, yada, yada. As soon as I made that decision and we both agreed and I said, okay, I'm going to go home and I'm going to register, a pod of dolphins started leaping and jumping and pirouetting and flipping out of the water, like right in front of us. It was the most beautiful, magical display that I have only ever seen at wildlife parks with the marine mammal shows. I mean, it was so beautiful and I got full body chills. And I knew in that moment that this was going to be the beginning of something. I just had no idea what it would open up and how magical and amazing that journey would become.
So incredible. And I'm guessing in that moment, it's not like you had, most of us when we're kind of step into the dark woods as you did by like saying, okay, I'm not going to search for another job right away. I'm going to look for this other thing. I'm going to see if there's something else because I can see I'm banging my head against the wall over and over. It's like, while we may get this amazing display, there's a part of ourselves that's still wondering, is that really, did you have a moment at all where you're like, I know this seems really major, something happened, but did you doubt that later on? Like, was there any part of yourself that wasn't quite sure? Like, did you have a deep faith that everything was going to work out?
No, of course not.
You just want people to know that it's not like you get this amazing sign and then everything's heavenly afterwards. Usually it's like you get the sign and then you're like, is that really a sign? Or like, then the chaos continues to ensue.
Yes. Yeah. So within 2 months, I knew that this was something that I wanted to do. And the aspect of learning the tools meant that I was doing my own work on things.
Yeah.
And that's where it got heavy. And I found so much freedom in that. And it was so juicy to experience it and receive it, that that's what inspired me to want to share it with other people. And it took me a good 2 years to get my coaching business up and going. I mean, it really was, this constant, okay, I got to keep doing this because this feels too good to not be doing it. And I couldn't imagine myself going backward to doing other more corporate stuff again. It just felt too constricting and too much like I couldn't breathe. And so, there was some conversations with the husband about making some lifestyle changes when the income wasn't coming through. So yeah, it wasn't without its own challenges and its own questioning myself. And there were bright spots and moments where it was just like, keep going, keep going, keep going. I remember actually reaching out to you a few times for wisdom there and connecting in with a couple, beasties to kind of, they brought that wisdom. It's just like, just stick with it.
Yeah. And it's so hard to do, especially like, as coaches often, or whatever it is you're promoting, if you're working on a new business, it's like, I think the best advice I ever got was act as if 10,000 people are reading your blog or reading your Facebook posts, because it's like usually nobody is, or maybe your grandma is, or your mother's liking them or something, which is wonderful. But you're like, I really want somebody else to tell me I'm doing a good job, because it's sort of, until it takes time.
Yes, it does take time.
And when people see that we keep showing up without any likes or any comments, day after day, day in, day out, eventually somebody goes, hey, that Jen Bauer, I think she seems to be really doing this life coach. It's not just a fly-by-night ideal. She's going to do it.
Yes.
And it's so amazing. Yeah, so cool. So talking about the beasties. So one of the things that I think is so interesting about this the Institute for Nature-Centered Coaching that you're creating is like, you have used one of your favorite beasties as a model for human transformation. And I want to, yeah, just to highlight that. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I've always had an admiration of sea turtles, and that, goes from spending summers in Hawaii and being able to swim with them and snorkel, and they're just such amazing creatures. And when I thought about their life cycle, it felt really reminiscent to what we go through in our own experiences. So, with that hatching nesting phase, or sorry, the nesting phase, where, this giant, some sea turtles are like the size of Volkswagen bugs, heaving themselves out of the water and up the sand. And it feels so uncomfortable to be in this environment that no longer feels like what they're comfortable doing. And then they're creating this new identity, but they don't know what that is going to look like yet. So they're creating this nest and dropping these eggs into it. And it's this really just uncomfortable moment. And I feel like when I hearken that back to, I don't know what I'm going to do if I'm laid off, what does that next career look like? I don't know coaching it. I'm learning it, but I have no idea what it is. And I'm experiencing it, and it's awkward and it's uncomfortable, but I also know that there's something beautiful that's about to happen. And then it's that incubation. So those, eggs that are in the sand in this little nest are in that development of, what does that new identity look like? What's it going to feel like? What's that, forming of that idea of that new role, of that new identity in our lives? And then we go into this hatching phase. And I feel like for a lot of us, and especially in the coaching world, I was jumping from corporate to coaching. So the community and the values and the experiences and the language that we use is like night and day. And it felt really lonely to not have anyone else that would speak that language or understand what I was doing and talking about. And so,
Absolutely.
That phase of hatching feels like a coming out, if you will, like here's who I am, and being willing to step into that new role, and hoping that you're not judged for it, and hoping that it will be accepted and loved and encouraged and nurtured. And I feel like there's a whole aspect to that is its phase in and of itself, is that first coming out layer, before we're able to build that community and call those people in. But we have to step into that true nature in order for us to find that new community.
The new group of people. I used to joke like, oh, I'm going to call the Department of Pathology, be like, hey guys, because all my male partners, you know what? I'm like having so much fun talking with spirit animals and stuff like that, that I really, I'm not going to be coming back. I mean, I joked about that, but the thought of actually telling them what I've been up to on my sabbatical was like horrifying, because I just thought they'll never understand. And I never really gave them the chance. They probably would have understood, but I never, because it felt so terrifying. And
vulnerable, yeah.
Describe it as the empty elevator. When we're in this huge transformation and our foundation is shaking, it's like it can be very lonely. But I always tell people, like, at some point the doors will open again and you will enter on a different floor, not necessarily higher or lower that we're better than anybody, but just that there's new people there that will be our new community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then we get to start our hatchlings journey. And so, this little sea turtle that's guided by the tug and the gravitational pull of the moon, which I find so beautiful, just knowing that they know which they're coming out of this nest, and there can be obstacles. They can't even see where the ocean is, but yet they know the direction to go simply by their connection to the moon, which is just so profound in and of itself. And then they have to go all over these obstacles, and they have to, there's seagulls that want to eat them and other predators and everything else that they have to bypass, that feels like how it feels to start that new business. It's like one obstacle after the next, but between passion and perseverance and patience with all of that, we are able to overcome all of those obstacles, because we know without a doubt that the ocean's where we're supposed to be.
Yeah. And then they get in that water. And I don't know if this is part of your model, but one of if you've ever watched the Disney movie, which is about the sea turtles, what is it called? Do you know the title? I can't think of it, but it's so wonderful. You guys go watch it some weekend. But when the baby turtles, they basically eventually get to a raft of kelp. of specialized seaweed, and they just grab onto it or just like heave themselves onto it, somehow connect. And that thing basically becomes like a giant raft and pulls them around the world, like until they're ready to do stuff. And I feel like that's kind of what happens. Like magical assistance does happen as you're willing to just keep dragging your body towards the moon, if you will.
Yeah. And then I feel like there's this moment of surrender, because this itty bitty little turtle about yay big is going up to these giant waves that would look like a tidal wave when thinking about respective size, but they're completely trusting it. Like they are just head forward, straight in, let's go. I'm fully surrendered into knowing that this is where I'm supposed to be. They're not like, I'm going to chill back on the beach with a Mai Tai. I'm good.
Yeah, wait for a nice current or a good day.
Yeah,
right?
no.
The perfect day, it's like does not exist.
No, not at all. And so there's this moment of surrender, and surrender is really hard to learn. I mean, I found that that was a whole big series of lessons and limiting belief unraveling in and of itself, to just simply learn that surrender into that higher power, surrender into knowing that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
I've asked a lot of people that question, like, when did you surrender? Like, depending on what it is, whether it's a discipline not to eat sugar, when did you just surrender and say, I'm not going to fight this anymore? Or when did you, whatever it was that they just kind of stopped trying to fight and just went with whatever. And it's just very interesting. I agree. It's a very hard concept to teach. You kind of have to live it and keep trying to find that surrender, whatever it is.
Totally. And then once they're in the ocean is providing everything they need. So they're able to flow. It's the food, it's got the crevices to live in, it's got the community, it's got all of that.
Crevices. I love that. I need a coaching crevice to live in. It's just so fabulous. Oh, I love it. Yeah, it's got everything we need. Go on. Sorry, I didn't.
It's fine. But when we're in the flow, and how do you navigate the flow? How do you ebb between the masculine and the feminine and know how much of each to allow that to maintain and flow. And so
like when to paddle and when to just let the current take you. Yeah,
exactly. It's like, what was that Finding Nemo when all of them rode the current? That's what I think of in that.
Never. It's like hang shell, dude, or whatever they say. It's just like, it doesn't have to be that hard. But I'm my own worst enemy as I'm like trying to fight. I'm like, I'm not sure if it's okay to go into the current. It's like, what? It's like, dude, you need to come in here. Yeah.
Yes. And then, if that's our life cycle, have you experienced the hatcheries, like the rescue hatcheries that help the sea turtles out? So sea turtles are endangered. And, a lot of the beaches that they nest on have become resorts. And so there's a lot of people working, whether it's nonprofits or even some of the resorts now have learned to get wise to it. Well, they'll go searching for the nests, they'll see the tracks that look like tire tracks that lead up from the ocean, and they know that that's where the nest is, and they'll dig up the eggs and they'll bring them back to the hatcheries so that they can kind of protect them. And I feel like coaching is very much like that. Not that we're rescuing our clients, that's not at all what I'm saying, but we're creating that safe space for them to go through each one of those stages. Mm-hmm. We help them in that incubation. It's like, here's the safe space for you to ideate and think about and dream. And here's the safe space for you to hatch and be able to say for the first time, here's what I want to do. And here's this new identity I want to step into. And even like how to navigate that journey. If you are working at a hatchery, you wait until all the hatchlings have come to the surface. It's got this netting around it, so the seagulls and other predators can't get to it. And then they basically release them at dusk when all the predators are not out and about. And they do them close enough to the ocean that they don't have a ton of obstacle, but they still have enough to be able to get there. I feel like in coaching, we're helping remove the limiting beliefs. We're helping our clients start to break through some of those blocks that they've had so that they can reach the ocean. Surrender is completely all up to them. We can't help them with that, but that hatchery does feel like that's where we really help our clients the most.
Yeah, so beautiful. Yeah, and I think that's really what it is. Ultimately, if you've gone through something, I know for myself, when I hired my first coach, I mean, I really had no idea what I was trying to become. I just knew I was terribly unhappy. And I was just so out of integrity with who I am. And it just became so painful, but it was just having that one person just listening to me yammer on about whatever, just listening to me, creating that space, which was powerfully helpful. And eventually I started decoupaging, you know, and that's really where some of my identities started to come and the beasties started to come.
Fun.
Yeah. Um, what other lessons like has Sea Turtle shared with you? I mean, you know, if you, I guess that's my last, or either that, or is there been a more recent beastie that showed up? I always like to ask my guests that, like, if there's somebody who's showed up to teach you something.
I've had a couple beasties show up recently to teach something. With regard to the sea turtle, I think keeping that boundary shell while remaining soft and compassionate on the inside is a beautiful lesson that I've learned from
Yeah.
sea turtles, is learning how to hold those boundaries and knowing that it can be hard boundary or soft boundary, but it doesn't mean that we're not compassionate, loving individuals and soft and goopy on the inside. So that's been a fun one for me to lean into. But recently, I mean, yeah, with starting the Institute, you know, there's those moments of doubt of like, oh my gosh, this is so big. Should I really be the person doing this?
Yeah.
You know, that self-doubt. And I had come back from a morning walk with my dog, and I'd seen this bird that was laying outside a window in our patio. So I brought the dog inside and I came back out with a little box and some tissue in it and was able to pick up the bird. She didn't resist me at all, but she wasn't flying. She wasn't really moving. She kind of brought her wings back in and tucked in and sat inside the little box. I brought her inside, got her warm, gave her some Reiki, put a little dish of water next to her. And I know you're a part of this Facebook group too, but the Animal Wisdom Insiders, I just posted a little note in that group to see if anybody could connect with her and see what she needed. Like, what could I help her with? Do I need to bring her to the vet? You know, is she hurt or is she just dazed? Did she hit the window? Wasn't sure. So I do the little post and I send it in. And then I just kind of sit with her, send her some more Reiki. And she just sat there for a good 20 or 30 minutes. And I went about working. And then all of a sudden she flew up and landed on my arm. And then she started flying around the office here. And she seemed okay. Like she seemed to be flying okay, was okay. So I opened my window over here and I let her out and she flew out. And then I went about my day for a few hours and went, oh, wait, I got to go update the group because I don't want people connecting now if I don't need them to connect. And when I logged in, a woman had written a post response to mine that basically was like, she's fine now. She was dazed earlier, but she has a message for you. That thing that you think is too big and too hard and too risky, take the leap and fly.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? It brings tears to my eyes
Me
because
too.
I know what it's like to try to do something that feels really big and it's hard, and it's like, wow, it's just so incredible. So incredible.
Yes.
Guys, like, and the first gathering of all the instructors for this institute was like very magical, and all I know is I don't know, but there's some really beautiful energy swirling around this school, and obviously it seems to want to happen.
Yes.
And so tell, like, people who are listening to this and are interested in learning more about the institute and how to apply, you know, what I know you have like a Q&A coming up.
I do have a Q&A. So at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, May 11th, 5 p.m. Pacific, I should say. On Tuesday, May 11th, I'll be hosting a webinar just to answer questions, maybe do some live coaching with folks, just to kind of provide more information and hopefully, you know, whatever interest is there, just to kind of talk further about what we're doing and if it's
And
a
they
fit
can
for folks.
contact you to get that. Like, I can share your email maybe, or some way to or a link page or somewhere to sign up.
Yeah.
We'll share that in the information below or in the video.
Yes, sounds
Yeah.
good.
Any last words for somebody who is like, any advice you have for somebody who's considering like a coaching career and wondering if it's for them, you know, wondering like, yeah, how to proceed? Any words of wisdom?
I think if you feel that nudge and that calling towards it, if there's some sort of spark of energy when you're hearing about this conversation that we're having or any of the posts that we've had on social, that if you feel that connection to nature and if you recognize that there's something more that you're intended to do with that, this is a good path towards connecting in, not only for your own self and your own personal growth, but also if you're wanting to ripple outwards and share that with other people and feel the need and the call to be of service.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jen Bauer. It's been a delight.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Sarah. You know, I adore you.
Oh,
I'm so
thank
grateful that you're on this team, teaching team too. So you're going to bring so much goodness to the
you. So
classes.
excited. Yeah. Thank you for being here, and everybody, I will go follow Jen and follow her Institute for Nature-Centered Coaching.
Yes,
Thank
please.
you.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'm just hanging a second. I don't know what I'm doing. Cancel. I'm pausing. I'm stopping recording.